At 11:32 a.m. on November 29, 1943, Staff Sergeant Eugene Moran knelt in the tail section of a B-17 flying fortress named Rikki Tikki Tavi, his eyes fixed on the sky as German fighters swarmed toward his bomber like angry hornets. Moran was 19 years old, a farm boy from Wisconsin on his first combat mission over a heavily defended target. The 8th Air Force had sent over 300 bombers that morning to destroy Bremen's factories. Already, 6 B-17s had been shot down in the first hour. The tail gunner's position was the loneliest on the aircraft. Moran sat on a bicycle-style seat at the very back, separated from the rest of the crew by 40 feet of fuselage. His only company was a pair of .50 caliber machine guns and the German fighters attempting to kill him. The B-17 carried 10 men in total, pilot and co-pilot in the cockpit, navigator and bombardier in the nose, flight engineer in the top turret, radio operator behind the bomb bay, 2 waist gunners standing at open windows, a ball turret gunner beneath the aircraft in a glass sphere, and Moran alone in the tail. The tail gunner's task was clear: protect the bomber's most vulnerable angle. German pilots knew that attacking a B-17 from directly behind put them in the line of fire of only one man, the tail gunner. By November 1943, the 8th Air Force was losing bombers at a catastrophic rate. 2 months earlier, the mission to Schweinfurt had cost 60 B-17s in a single day, with 600 men killed or captured. Bomber crews called such deep missions milk runs to hell. The mathematics of survival were brutal. A crew had to complete 25 missions to return home, but statistical analysis showed that most crews lasted only 15 missions. Some units lost half their aircraft each month. Moran had enlisted the day he turned 18, growing up on a dairy farm near Soldiers Grove, Wisconsin. He had dreamed of flying while watching planes overhead. The Army Air Forces needed gunners, young men, with quick reflexes, steady nerves, and shooting skills. Gunnery training taught Moran to track fast-moving targets, compensate for wind, altitude, and the aircraft's own speed. He learned to fire in short bursts to prevent overheating and memorized the silhouettes of German fighters, Messerschmitt Bf-109 and Focke-Wulf FW-190, recognizable even at 2,000 yards. But no training could prepare anyone for real combat over Germany. At 24,000 feet, temperatures dropped to 40 degrees below zero. Frostbite claimed fingers and toes, and the thin air made every movement exhausting. German fighters came in waves, firing 20mm cannons that could slice through aluminum like paper. Rikki Tikki Tavi had taken off that morning from Snetterton Heath in England as part of the 96th Bomb Group, with Bremen, an industrial city on the Weser River, as the target. Shipyards, aircraft factories, and submarine pens made it one of Germany's most defended cities. Bomber formations crossed the North Sea in tight defensive boxes, each B-17 positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. The theory: pack bombers close enough that their combined firepower could repel enemy fighters. The reality: a direct hit on one aircraft often damaged those flying beside it. As they approached Bremen, anti-aircraft flak erupted. Black bursts filled the sky, and bombers could not maneuver. They had to fly straight and level for the bomb run. Shrapnel tore through wings and fuselages. Moran watched a B-17 ahead take a direct hit, folding in half before plummeting to the ground. Rikki Tikki Tavi released its bombs, 4,000 pounds of high explosives tumbling toward the factories below. Mission accomplished. Now they just had to survive the return flight. The bomber formation turned toward England. 200 miles of hostile airspace lay between them and safety. That's when the number 2 engine of Rikki Tikki Tavi took a direct hit from flak. The propeller windmilled uselessly, and the aircraft began losing speed. Falling behind the formation was a death sentence. German fighters quickly targeted stragglers. Moran saw a dozen Messerschmitts climbing from below, and Focke-Wulfs diving from above. Rikki Tikki Tavi was about to fight alone, and Moran would be the first target. The first fighters came from the 6-to-low position, directly behind and beneath the bomber. Moran pressed against the steel chest plate and squeezed the triggers. Shock Gefecht. Twin .50 calibers roared. Tracer rounds streaked through the sky, forcing one German fighter to break off. But there were more. They attacked in pairs, one to distract, one to kill. Moran swung his guns from target to target, spent brass piling around his knees, the smell of cordite filling the cramped compartment. At 24,000 feet, 43 degrees below zero, pressed through even his electrically heated flight suit. His breath formed ice crystals on the oxygen mask. The guns grew hot. His fingers went numb. German pilots were seasoned veterans, knowing exactly how to destroy a B-17. First the engines, then the gunners, then the fuselage. Moran could hear the impacts before feeling them, 20mm shells tearing aluminum. Somewhere forward, the waist gunners stopped firing. The intercom crackled with static and fragments of voices. A Focke-Wulf dove in from 4 Aun. Moran fired, and the fighter's wing disintegrated, spiraling downward in black smoke, his first confirmed kill. There was no time to celebrate. Cannon rounds ripped through the tail section. Moran felt sharp impacts slam into both arms. Blood soaked his sleeves, but he could still grip the triggers. More hits tore at the vertical stabilizer. Control cables snapped, whipping through the compartment. The tail began vibrating violently. Something was wrong. Moran glanced at his parachute. Holes everywhere. Cannon rounds had shredded it. Falling without a parachute meant certain death from 24,000 feet. The German fighters kept circling, unaware that a wounded tail gunner refused to die. Despite the spinning, the G-forces, the pain, Moran fired continuously. Tracers arced wildly, striking enemy planes. A Messerschmitt took hits and dove smoking to the ground. The tail section's remaining stabilizers acted like crude wings. Drag slowed the descent. Instead of free-falling, the wreckage glided. Moran estimated 100 feet per second, still fatal, but slower than freefall. The ground rushed closer. 5,000 feet. 3,000 feet. 1,000 feet. He braced himself, clutching ammo boxes. The tail struck a pine tree at 100 MF, snapping branches and tearing the vertical stabilizer. The wreckage cartwheeled through the forest, Moran's head slamming against steel. His arms bent unnaturally, ribs cracked, blood everywhere. Finally, the tail section crashed into the frozen ground. Silence. Miraculously, Moran was alive. Both forearms broken, ribs shattered, skull partially exposed. Hypothermia and blood loss threatened him. He crawled from the wreckage, weak but alive. German soldiers appeared, rifles raised. They searched him roughly, examined the tail section, and summoned an officer. Moran was clearly dying, yet they transported him onto a wooden cart without medical care, bouncing along frozen roads for hours. At the POW hospital, under-equipped German doctors ignored him at first. Infection set in. Bone fragments, gangrene, exposed brain tissue, all threatened his survival. On the third day, 2 Serbian military doctors, prisoners themselves, performed surgery with minimal tools and no proper anesthesia. They set his arms with wire and metal pins, removed infected tissue, and attached a crude metal plate to his skull. Moran drifted in and out of consciousness as they worked. The next 72 hours would decide his fate. Fever rose to 104 degrees, body shaking violently. He slipped into delirium, hallucinating the crash repeatedly. The Serbian doctors offered only water, cold cloths, and whispered encouragement. Against all odds, Moran survived. Tissue began to close. Bones began to heal. Weeks later, he could walk, arm still in splints, metal skull plate causing constant headaches. Moran was transferred through a series of POW camps, enduring the hellship, overcrowded cattle cars, starvation, disease, and abuse. Autumn 1944 brought the Black March, an 86-day forced march over 600 miles of snow and ice. Prisoners slept in barns or open fields, ate raw potatoes, drank contaminated water, and marched under threat of death. Despite his injuries, Moran kept moving. By April 26, 1945, Allied forces intercepted the column near the Elbe River. Moran, now weighing 93 pounds, was finally free. Medals followed: 2 Purple Hearts, Air Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster, European Theater Medal, Good Conduct Medal, and Honorable Discharge. Only 3 Allied airmen survived falls comparable to his without parachutes. Moran returned home to Soldiers Grove, Wisconsin, married Margaret Finley, and built a life on the family farm. The physical and psychological scars remained, but he lived. In 2007, he received the Veteran Lifetime Achievement Award from the Wisconsin Board of Veterans Affairs. His story became the book Tailspin in 2022. Eugene Moran died on March 23, 2014 at age 89. A farm boy who survived impossible odds, who fell 4 miles without a parachute, endured 17 months of captivity, the hellship, the Black March, and returned home to live a full life. His philosophy remained simple: I would rather wear out than rust out. A Focke-Wulf dove from the 4EU position. Moran fired. The fighter's wing disintegrated, spiraling downward in smoke. His first confirmed kill. Cannon rounds ripped through the tail. Moran felt impact slam into both arms. Blood soaked his sleeves, but he kept fighting. More hits tore the vertical stabilizer. Control cables snapped. The tail vibrated violently. Something was terribly wrong. Moran glanced at his parachute. Cannon rounds had shredded it. Falling 24,000 feet without a parachute meant certain death. Yet even wounded, Moran continued to fire. Enemy fighters circled closer, unaware that a single man in a falling coffin was still a deadly threat. Tracers arced through the sky. A Messerschmitt dove, took hits, and smoked toward the ground. The tail section stabilizers acted like crude wings, slowing the descent. Instead of free-falling, the wreckage glided. Moran estimated 100 feet per second, fast enough to kill, but slower than freefall. The ground rushed closer. He braced himself, clutching ammo boxes. The tail struck a pine tree at 100 mm, snapping branches and tearing away the vertical stabilizer. The wreckage cartwheeled through the forest canopy. Finally, the tail section crashed into the frozen ground. Moran was alive. Both forearms broken, ribs shattered, skull partially exposed. Hypothermia and blood loss threatened him. Crawling from the wreckage, he faced enemy soldiers. They roughly examined him, then transported him onto a wooden cart without medical care. Each jolt sent waves of pain through his broken body. At a POW hospital, Moran's condition worsened. Infection spread. Bone fragments, gangrene, and exposed brain tissue threatened his life. On the third day, 2 Serbian doctors, prisoners themselves, performed surgery with minimal tools and no anesthesia. They wired his broken arms, removed infected tissue, and attached a crude metal plate to his skull. Moran drifted in and out of consciousness. The next 72 hours would determine his fate. Fever spiked. Moran called for his mother in delirium. Hallucinations of the crash haunted him. The doctors could offer nothing but water, cold cloths, and whispered encouragement. Against all odds, Moran survived. Bones began healing. Tissue around the skull plate started to close. Weeks later, he could walk again, arms still in splints, metal plate causing constant headaches. Moran endured multiple POW transfers, the Hellship, and starvation. Autumn 1944 brought the Black March, an 86-day forced march over 600 miles of frozen terrain. Prisoners slept in barns or open fields, ate raw potatoes, drank contaminated water, and faced death with every step. Despite his injuries, Moran kept walking, refusing to surrender. By April 26, 1945, Allied forces intercepted the column near the Elbe River. Moran, now weighing 93 pounds, was free. Medals followed. 2 Purple Hearts, Air Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster, European Theater Medal, and Good Conduct Medal. Only 3 Allied airmen survived falls comparable to his without parachutes. Moran's story became legend. He returned home to Soldiers Grove, Wisconsin, married Margaret Finley, and built a life on the family farm. Physical and psychological scars remained. The roar of engines, the chatter of machine guns, and the tearing aluminum haunted him forever. Yet he lived, raised 9 children, and outlived most of his fellow prisoners. In 2007, Moran received the Veteran Lifetime Achievement Award from Wisconsin. His story became the book Tailspin in 2022. He died on March 23, 2014, at age 89. The farm boy who fell 4 miles without a parachute, survived 17 months of captivity, the Hellship, and the Black March, lived a full life. His philosophy was simple: I would rather wear out than rust out. Eugene Moran, the tail gunner who refused to die, will never be forgotten.